This happened to me a couple of years ago when I was 15 or 16. Me and my friend, let's call her Angie, we were just hanging out and listening to music one Friday night. My parents had gone out to a restaurant with some new friends from work. About halfway through the evening, my mom shows up with an unfamiliar girl, Sam. Turns out she was the daughter of my parents' new friends, and my mom thought she would enjoy the night more with me and Angie than being stuck with the grown-ups. We all hit it off quite soon, and it turned out that like me and Angie, she loved watching crime documentaries and anything related with scary, creepy people in society. Soon we started hanging out on a regular basis, and we became very close. The one day we were over at her house, she received a phone call from an anonymous number. When the call ended, she was visibly shaken and told us that her friend had called her to warn that he drove past her house and saw some suspicious people looking around at the house. As soon as she tells us this, a banging comes from the door that leads to the garage that is attached to the house. This means that whoever was banging had already trespassed onto the property and gone through the garage. The next moment, an angry male voice starts yelling profanities at us. Angie and Sam start to freak out and cry. I had a bit of a slow reaction, and I don't think I realized how serious this situation really was. But I kind of became numb with fear. Eventually the banging stopped, but then we saw something scarier. Shadows of people through the curtains moving around the house. Angie quickly reacts by pulling us into the pantry, the only room in the house with no windows and a bolt on the inside as well. I'm guessing about an hour goes by while we just sit there in the pantry and hear nothing else. In our panic, me and Angie left our phones in the lounge, and Sam's phone had died. All of us were too scared to go out to try and get our phones. But then we hear the scariest noise of all, a door in the kitchen slowly creaking open. This made Angie whimper, which alerted whoever was in the kitchen to our presence. A voice from the other side let us know that it was Sam's mom. We told her what happened and she was visibly upset by it. She then dropped me and Angie off at my house. The same night of this incident, my mom receives a phone call from Sam's mom. Turns out that this is some sort of sick game she likes to play with other people, where she would invite them over and then try and freak them out as much as she can with her boyfriend and his friends. Her mom said that we were some of the lucky ones, as apparently in one of their pranks, they had actually held a girl hostage and tied her up, with Sam next to her pretending to freak out as well. After that, my parents broke off all connections with them, and I've never seen her again. Be careful who you call your friends.
Hey, I've been reading Let's Not Meet for quite a while now, and decided to post my own creepy encounter with the weird guy at a cinema. Side note, I'm 18, and at the time, I was 17, and my friends were 15 and 16, but that isn't very important anyways. So, the story took place almost a year ago. It was a few days before Christmas break ended, so me and a few friends decided to go watch a movie. I believe it was Deadpool, but I don't really remember. It was going to be 2 guys and 3 girls, including me. Now, the place where I live is not necessarily considered a safe place to hang out. However, I feel safe with other people, especially if it's with guys too. We all met up at the cinema and walked in. It was an afternoon show during the holidays, so it was quite full. As we walked in, I texted one of the guys that was supposed to come. He would let me know that he wasn't able to make it as something came up. We, however, already bought a ticket for him, and though that wasn't really a problem. We walk in and take our seats. A reminder, we are now only 4 people, 3 girls and 1 guy. I walk through and leave the seat that was originally for my other friend empty. Next to my right are the 2 girls, and the guy is next to them. I hope that makes sense. So the order is me, friend, friend, friend. So I sit on the outside, basically with seats to my left empty. As I turn around, I see a few guys from our school. As the lights turn off, I don't think anything of it, as a boy comes from a row above us and asks me to remove my bag and snacks from the seat that we paid for so he could sit right next to me. He actually just motioned me to remove it and literally sat on my handbag, so I had to pull it from underneath his butt. I'm not even kidding. At first, I thought it was one of the guys from our school, as I didn't see his face and the lights were turned off, so only the light from the screen lit up his frame. As we were watching the movie, I realized that it is an older man, maybe in his 30s or 40s. Whenever there was a joke in the movie, I heard him laugh, and for some reason, I felt more uneasy the longer we were in there. I just got this weird vibe from him. I tried to move closer to my friend on the right, but for some reason, he seemed to always be close to me. I had a Sprite bottle in the drink holder, and that's on the left side of me, and it was open. I hadn't taken a sip yet because I felt too nervous to make a move. I'm silly, I know. However, at some point, when it was quiet during the movie, I heard a noise coming from his side, like something fell into liquid. I glanced over, and from the light off the screen, I saw that the Sprite had those bubbles on the top. And I heard fizzling afterwards. Now, I probably jumped to a conclusion from this, but it was an odd situation. I thought that he might have put something into the Sprite. However, I have no proof whatsoever, so this is just what I thought happened. I did not drink from the Sprite, and I left it there when we left the room. As we waited to get picked up, I told my friends about that, and they all agreed that it was super fucking weird that he sat there, especially since it was our paid seat and not his for sure. He walked past us and stayed close for a very long time, even though he was obviously an adult and probably had a car. When we left, he walked over to a car and drove off into the other direction. I know this story might sound crazy, but I'm just very paranoid, but I wanted to share it either way. So, creepy cinema guy, please, let's not meet again.
So, a little context. I live in the basement of a 2-story house. My bro and I rent it. He has the upper floor, and my girlfriend and I live on the lower floor. He's entertaining a lady friend this evening, and I am in my room trying not to hack up a lung. I have that flu going around, so I've been curled up under my comforter, sleeping on and off and watching Netflix. Around 8. It had to be, as my girlfriend had just dropped off some soup and Powerade from the store to me, and headed to work. She's a deputy from the next town over's police department, so she just leaves and I'm back in bed, dog next to me, perusing my choices on Netflix when I hear our gate open. Now the dog hears it too. She's a cattle dog, so she's very protective of her turf, and me. She's growling. At first I think it's my brother and his friend going to soak in the hot tub. Then I get a text. It's my brother, he and his lady friend are headed to the store. Do I want anything? I freeze. So, if he's not here, who the fuck is outside in my yard? I grab my rifle. It's not loaded, so I load it while the dog's making a racket. My window's open a smidge, and I approach it. The way my windows are, and it's hard to explain, is that they are well windows. There's a ladder that leads to the yard on both windows, and 2 grates that open. I shout out, "Who the fuck's there?" No answer, just giggling. So I say, "Fuck this," and dial 911. Midst of doing this, the grate swings open, and a stringy hair blonde chick starts coming down the ladder. She sees me, rifle in hand, and bangs on the window, Well, I'm telling dispatch what's going on, and they tell me a unit's on the way. The chick's going on about zenith and vibrations. And the aliens told her and her friend I have drugs. I tell her and her friend to get the fuck out. I hear the male yell, "Cops!" and the skinny ass books it. So I run upstairs, my dog hot on my heel. I open the back door and my dog runs after them. Both of them hop over my yard to my neighbors. I hear the cops coming into my yard. I let them know I have a gun and I set it on the grass. I point to my neighbor's wall and one cop lifts himself over. But they've already escaped. I let them know what happened and they're pretty sure that they know this particular duo. By this time my brother's home, so I fill him and his girlfriend in. Cops tell us to keep windows and doors locked. They come back, we're to call the cops. Now I'm back in my room. Too fucking keyed up to sleep. So I figured I'll write it on Reddit.
I'm a British French guy, who, up until this happened, I actually classed myself as anti-theist, as I hated and still do religion. My dad was an atheist, my mom was Catholic. I was brought up with the Christian way of life. However, I always rejected anything to do with it. I first met this girl who was Meridian and working for an airline. When I was living in London, UK, I met her on Plenty of Fish, I think, but it could have been any dating app. We chatted for a couple of weeks and then decided to meet up when she came for her next flight to London. We connected straight away and eventually started a relationship. After about 6 months to a year of being with her, I started noticing little things about her, such as sometimes she was very weak and couldn't even get out of bed, as well as cut marks on her body. I eventually wanted to know what was up with her and pushed her to tell me. Turned out that she had a blessing of a Hindu deity / god Kala put on her when she was younger. Not only that, but she told me she had a curse put on her family as well. No female member of her family would be happy in their relationships. She lived with her sister and mother. I at the time was very skeptical, and although I didn't think she was lying about it, I did doubt what she was saying and thought maybe these marks on her body were self-mutilation to some extent. I stayed with her for another 2 years. Although I would notice these marks on her body and her telling me she felt weak, I didn't pay that much attention to it. I was pretty crazy about her. After about 2.5 years of being with her, I decided to go to Meridius. I had planned to propose to her there. This is when I started to realize she was telling the truth and wasn't herself causing these marks on her body. In the run-up to me actually going to Meridius, I bought a ring and I was living with my friend in a flat in West London. This is when my friend and I started to experience things firsthand. It started with small things like me putting an object down somewhere and then noticing it had moved when I went to look for it. I actually emailed myself over the months when these things took place and have the emails open. I will condense into points below as to what this thing that was living with us did. By the way, my flatmate was called Lee. Lee's door opening on its own, modem turning itself off twice, cupboard door opening itself, Lee's flip-flops being moved, Dr. Pepper bottle being moved, coat stand moving on its own when I walked past it. Lee noticed it move, not me. Lee's shoes being moved, bog roll being moved. Lee's phone calls me. Lee called me, but I only noticed after, and apparently he didn't call me. Plug switch next to modem turning itself off. Lee's laptop moved from being plugged in to being moved into cupboard, hidden under sheet. Moved my weed, can't find it. Later, my mom found it in one of my plant pots when I had moved out. Turned a tap on in the bathroom. Knocking in the flat, 2 sets of 3 knocks. Flipped my laptop over. Came home from work to find laptop upside down. Turned off monitor by wall socket. Hidden tobacco pouch. Later found it in freezer. Cut back at my neck. Found tobacco in freezer. Turned off my laptop and switched on the wall to the modem at the same time. Lee's hanger spinning on its own in cupboard. Turned off modem by modem switch. Turned on living room light in morning. Turned on Lee's radiator. hidden my laptop mouse, which I found weeks later shoved down my trainer, cut back of my neck. Will explain further down these points. Turned off my laptop and switched on the wall next to the modem at the same time. Moved bottle of whiskey next to my bed while also I was in the room. Flicked a picture of Han Home. Found mouse in night trainer in living room. Had been shoved in tip. These are all the things that happened that I could remember, thanks to me emailing myself. But there were more. During the period of May 1st, 2012 to February 25th of 2012, when the last email to myself was, the most shocking to me and above was the thing cut the back of my neck. I can and will probably always remember that sensation. To give a bit more context, I woke up in a night to a burning sensation at the back of my neck and fell back asleep. The following day at work, I was in front of my computer and happened to touch the back of my neck. Without really thinking, I felt a cut/scar. I went to the toilet, took a photo of the back of my neck, as I remember what happened during the night. Could see a cut there. That freaked me out quite a bit. That was the first and only time this thing has actually touched me. I told my girlfriend about these things. She conducted some rituals back in Meridius that involved pigs being killed in order to lift the curse. But it didn't seem to do much. I kept questioning her about what she was doing to help, but she was very vague, as I think she didn't want to freak me out. I'd also gone on a date with a girl some years before, who was a spiritual healer. We kept in touch, and she helped me out by doing remote readings, and attempted to shift whatever was in my flat. I also burnt white sage in my flat, and put salt around the flat, as I was told this would help. I also started to pray to a Hindu deity, called him Hanuman, and built a shrine for him. This was the only time in my life where I actually prayed to a god/deity and actually felt their presence. After a while, things started to quiet down, but my girlfriend broke up with me, stating God didn't want us to be together, and I never even went to Meridius. If anyone has experienced anything similar, I would love to hear about it. Like I said, I was a non-believer before, but I'm actually grateful this happened to me, as now I feel as if I know what the world is really about.
Hey guys. So I've been reading some of these stories on Reddit for a while now of, stalkers, crazy ex-boyfriends, and run-ins with serial killers. But this experience I had just a few nights ago, I don't know. I really don't know how to explain it. Let me just start with some background, the way my house looks and where my room's located. I live in a medium-sized house with an upstairs and a downstairs. The upstairs has my parents' bedroom and my dad's office. The downstairs, of course, has the kitchen, and if you go down the stairs and head towards the kitchen, but make a left turn into the hallway, there's my bedroom and my sister's bedroom. The encounter with this thing happened in my bedroom. Well, outside of my window anyway. My room is your typical guy's room. Huge TV, dozens of games hanging around, and 2 windows. On the right side of my bed, and another at the head of my bed. Looking at this window, you can see my dad's big blue work truck, plus my neighbor's house across from it. Now, on to the encounter. It was a typical Friday night for me, or Saturday. It was 2 a.m. in the morning. I was up late, playing the new Final Fantasy 15 game. I work 5 days a week, and I only had 2 days off a week, so I wanted to take advantage of that as much as possible. Usually I'm in bed by 11. Finally, after playing the game for almost 7 hours, I decided to call it a night with my friends on PSN, and I go to bed. Shut off my PlayStation 4 and took my headphones out. But as soon as I did, I heard a noise. Coming from the window I mentioned earlier at the head of my bed. The noise kind of sounded like an animal moving through some of my dad's construction equipment on the back of his truck. I figured it was just a cat, considering we have a ton of strays where I live. So I shut off my lights and hopped into bed, rolling over on my right side. As I started to drift off to sleep, I heard a loud growl coming from the window I heard movement from just minutes ago. My eyes burst wide open. At this point, I know it's definitely not a cat, but what the hell else could it be? A dog? Dogs can't jump that high, especially my dad's truck. Then I hear sound of wings flapping. Not nervously or crazy, just a slight flap, mixed with more growls. My heart begins to beat faster as my imagination goes wild, thinking of what animal it could possibly be on my dad's truck. After a few minutes, I suck up enough courage to move the blinds and see what this animal or thing could be. I take a deep breath and pulled the little string to move my blinds up. And what I saw, I don't think I'll ever have a logical explanation for this. This thing had 2 horns on its head, giant wings, and large arms. It kind of looked like a gargoyle, as crazy as that sounds. Before I went to close the blinds, the little string got stuck, and I stupidly shouted out, "Fuck!" As soon as I yelled, its devilish ears twitched and turned around to face me. I never, in my life, had so much fear running through me. Its bright red eyes locked with my eyes. I was almost on the brink of tears. I truly felt like this gargoyle thing was going to burst through the window and rip me apart. It stared and stared, almost like it was waiting for me to run. A Facebook notification went off on my phone. Again, with a more shivering voice, I said, "Shit." And as soon as that thing roared at me and spread its wings, I must have jumped at least to my ceiling when this thing roared. I kept saying to myself over and over again in my head, "Please don't kill me, please don't kill me, please don't kill me." But it didn't. It took off and flew away. I slapped myself a few times to make sure I wasn't dreaming. I sat down on my bed, shaking, wondering what the fuck just happened. Sleep. Unfortunately, never happened that night. My nerves went through the roof. Any noise or sound I heard, I didn't feel better until I saw the sun come up. Now, before anybody asks, yes, after the sun came up, I checked the backyard and found nothing. No claw marks. No teeth marks. Nothing. If anybody has any info on what the hell this thing could be, please tell me. I'll update the story further if this thing comes back.
I've worked at the same grocery store for the last 4.5 years of my life. Of course, I have seen some pretty crazy people come in and whatnot, but this absolutely takes the cake for me. It was a regular work shift for me as a cashier, with me working short amounts of hours, whereas I was 16. I tended to keep the same schedule every week because I liked the days I worked, and it kept me on the ball, being in school and all. Since I worked during the day on weekends, I would usually see the same few regulars, which was not uncommon at all for me. One customer usually stood out to me, though. I never caught his name, but it was this older man, maybe in his late 60s, I'd say. This same customer would come into my register lane every single week on the same day around the same times. Not only that, but he would also buy the exact same groceries every week, and he would make me bag them to his liking. Honestly, I never even thought twice about this old man because he seemed pretty harmless and just super friendly. I was wrong. This one specific shift is where things went insanely south. I was on my register and I see him walking over as per usual, setting his things down on the belt. The normal conversation and whatnot. Then he asked me when I go on my break. Not only did I really not know for sure, but even if I had, I would not give that information out to this stranger. "I have something in my car for you. You should come out on your break and take it. I will wait for you." "Oh, I have no idea when I will be going on break. It could be hours." "That is okay. You know what? I have an even better idea. I will get it for you and bring it in here."
Now, I really did not know how to take this situation, so I notified my manager quick about the interaction and to keep an eye out for him. Lo and behold, he comes right back and 15 minutes later with a manila folder in his hands. This customer stands right at the end of my lane and watches me for over an hour, just standing there waiting for me, not making small talk with other customers or even breaking eye contact. The manager has been watching him and finally pulls him aside and says it's time for him to leave. This customer explains he has something for me and instructs my supervisor to give it to me when possible. My manager says yes, of course, and he leaves. Mind you, my girlfriend is actually currently working in a separate department and is notified, and she comes over. I will never, ever forget what I see next while I was still cashiering. My manager and my girlfriend open up the manila folder, and the color from their faces immediately drains. I see them shuffling through tons of papers until finally, my girlfriend snatches the folder and rips it in two. My manager pulls me off the register and tells me what he had left. It turns out, he had written hundreds of sexual love poems for me and his deceased mother combined. This man had been obsessed with me. I felt sick to my stomach and I wanted to throw up immediately. Later on, the police come and they ask me some questions about the incident and I give my statements and such. They eventually found him on our camera system from earlier that day and they had enough evidence to give me an option to file a restraining order on him, as well as legally banning him from our store. The police eventually contacted him, and when they asked him to confirm what he had tried giving me, he instantly hung up after talking for some time with the cop. I haven't seen this man since. Thank God, and I never plan on it.
When I was a senior in high school, my dad and I moved into a house right in the heart of the city we lived in. It was right next to a creek that ran through the city. Since it's in Florida, it's a swampy creek. My cousins and uncle had lived in it prior to us, so I already knew the layout, but that never made it any less creepy to me. I just always kinda had weird vibes about the house, like something bad had happened there before. Fast forward to me living there for a while now, kinda shaking the creepy vibe because things seemed to be okay. That was until my dad started leaving every weekend to visit his girlfriend and would leave me there to take care of the dog. At first, it was stuff I just rationalized as me already being on edge about the house and maybe imagining things. Like I would hear doors opening and closing when no one else was there, my dog seemingly wanting to always be by my side, even though she was usually pretty independent for a dog, etc. Then this happened. Has anyone else ever woken up from a dead sleep, swearing that you think someone had whispered your name very, very close to you, even though you're alone, and when you wake up no one else is there? It only happened once, but it was enough to freak me out to the point that I made sure I was never alone in the house for too long of a time period. So I did some research on the creepy things that had been documented around my small hometown. Turns out the creek right beside my house ran into the bay in the next small town over. It also turns out that the small town next door was frequented by none other than Al Capone, back before he got caught for tax evasion. The last thing that happened before I moved out really scared me to the core. My dad had already left for the weekend as usual, and I had my boyfriend come over to spend the night with me, so I wouldn't be alone. My dad had a speaker system set up in the living room, and he had a stack of DVDs sitting on top of the subwoofer. We were sitting on the couch just chatting with the TV off, when suddenly about half of the DVDs looked like they were swiped off the stack and crashed onto the floor. I looked at my boyfriend in horror before saying, "You saw that, right?" He nodded in disbelief. We went to his house that night. There are many more stories, but more or less, I think that maybe some of the people Al Capone killed, or had killed, ended up in the creek by my house.
This is a story that I've rarely told anyone, because it was legitimately the closest thing to a supernatural occurrence I've ever personally experienced, and it scares the shit out of me. I have a little brother. He's 3 years younger than me. When I was in 6th grade, we were home alone during the summertime and playing around as brothers do. Wrestling around, chasing each other around the house, nothing out of the ordinary. I ended up chasing him into our parents' room, and we were throwing stuff back and forth at each other, having a little fake war across the bed at each other. I don't know, kid stuff. It popped into my head that it'd be funny to scare him by shutting off the lights. There were no windows in our parents' room, so with the lights off, it's pitch black except for whatever light creeps in from under the door. I retreat to the door and decide at the last second that it'd be funnier to leave the room, turning the light out as I passed and close the door behind me, leaving him in the darkness alone, maybe scare him a bit. So, I did. I shut the door behind me as I turned the light off and left the room, turning around to listen to him as he panicked and wanted to come back in. But he didn't. "What are you doing?" I heard him say. Yes, he thinks I'm still in there, I guess. He didn't see me leave the room. I keep listening. "Jacob, what are you doing? You're freaking me out. Please, stop." That's odd. I wonder what he's talking about. I keep listening. "Jacob, I'm not joking. Get away from me and turn the light back on now, or I'm telling Mom that you scared me." What the fuck? Get away from me? Did he just say get away from me? Laughing, I yell through the door to him. Dude, I'm not even there. He screams, loudly, like he's being stabbed or something. I mean a blood-curdling scream. I freak the fuck out and try to open the door. It's locked. I didn't lock the fucking door. Why is it locked? My little brother is still screaming, begging me to help him. "Hurry, please!" I'm panicking. I have no idea what to do. I'm like 13 years old and weigh 90 pounds. I can't bust this door down. My little brother is in trouble. I have to get to him. He stops screaming. I try the door handle again, and to my surprise, it opens effortlessly. It's unlocked. I open the door and turn on the light. I see my brother in the corner, crying. After some consoling and apologizing, I finally get him to explain what happened. He tells me that when I turned the light out, his eyes hadn't adjusted to the light yet and it was just dark. After about 20 to 30 seconds, his eyes start to adjust, and from the little bit of light leaking in from under the door, he saw me standing in the corner with my back to him. When he asked what I was doing, I turned to him and start walking slowly across the room towards him. I kept coming until I was standing over him, looking down at him. He said he couldn't make out any features, just a dark figure with a shadowy face. He saw a hand extend out towards him and grab his shoulder. It was cold and very strong. It hurt him. When I opened the door and turned on the light, the figure was gone. It just wasn't there. I never saw anything myself. My brother is now 23 years old. I'm 26, and to this day, he won't talk about this event. We have friends who have heard the story through me and will tease him about it. He simply leaves the room, refusing to acknowledge it. He's admitted to me that even almost 15 years later, he is bothered by what happened that day. He still has nightmares from time to time. He still doesn't have any explanation for what happened.
Backstory. I went to visit my best friend who had moved from Arizona to California. It was fun until the end, where we got into a fight, resulting in cutting the trip a day short. The morning of, I packed my stuff and took an Uber to the Greyhound, and exchanged my ticket for a ride for that day. However, the next bus didn't leave until 4 p.m., and it was probably 10:30 a.m. I was so upset about my fight with my friend the night before that this 5.5-hour wait was just a little cherry on top of it all. I ended up going to a small grocery store and getting a few apples for the trip, and then heading back and waiting at the gate where my bus would arrive, and that's where I met Jeremy. He was sitting on the phone, talking real loud, and I couldn't help but observe him. He was a mid-30-year-old bald guy with a mustache, wearing a wife-beater, dickies, crew socks, and a baby blue bandana he kept rearranging, tied to his neck, hanging out of his pocket, simply wrapped around his wrist, etc. I know you're not supposed to judge, but I kind of just knew to keep my distance from this guy, just in case. So here I am, opening my book bag for an apple, and he looks over at me and asks if I'm hungry, to which I respond, "Oh, no thanks. I'm actually just looking for my apple." And he says, "I have plenty of candy. I don't really even want. Here, just take them." And he hands me some Snickers and Laffy Taffies and stuff. I knew right away that was a little weird, so I put them in my backpack for later. I was just planning on throwing them away when he wasn't looking. 4 p.m. arrives, and so does our bus. We get in, and the bus driver lets us know that we needed to stop in another city nearby to switch buses. So we all get off, and I head to the line where the new bus is going to be. And Jeremy flags me down and says, "Hey, I saved you a spot." And I said, "Oh, it's okay, thanks." And these two little old Asian ladies are near him, thanking him for saving them a spot, and talking to him like they knew him, and he was just as friendly, and kept on insisting on me coming over there. I thought, let's not cause a scene, what's the worst that could happen? I go over and thank him and wait for the bus, and he says, "Do you have $1 on you by any chance?" And I said, "Oh, yeah, here." And he goes and grabs a Coke and comes back with it. "For you," he said, and handed it to me. I was clearly confused because he said, "You look like you could use it." I was a little put off, but not too bad. Once the bus started loading us in, I sat down and he came right behind me and said, "Lucky we got seats next to each other," and took his laptop and some headphones out. Oh good, I'll be left alone, I thought. Wrong. "Here, grab the other headphone so we can watch a movie together." Obviously I declined, but he kept insisting, even though the internet wasn't working on that bus, so he couldn't play a movie anyways. So he resorted to talking. He asked a lot of questions about me and if I had a boyfriend, and I did. And he asked if I was ever going to get married to my boyfriend. That was where I finally got put off, but also tried to be engaging enough not to piss him off. Because they don't check your luggage at the Greyhound, and I didn't want to know what he had toting around in his bags. That sounds bad, but I was just trying to be safe. Then he starts telling me he was in California taking care of his sick dad, yada yada, and that he was heading to Texas to see his estranged wife and kids. He told me about how much he misses them, and how he couldn't wait to go back home and be a part of their lives again. While he is saying this, he is toying with a little piece of paper he took out of his pocket in his hands, and I glanced over at it without thinking. He lifts up the paper and says, "Oh yeah, I met a lady, very nice Filipino. We had a very good time last night, and she gave me some drinks from her homeland. For my trip. Want one?" And I shook my head. No, but he gave me one anyways. It was sort of like a Humex, a canned fruit drink, and I told him it was okay, but he grabbed himself one too and said, "Cheers." And then he started going on about this lady, and asking me for advice. Should I call her, Or do you think that would make my wife mad? I stared at the drink, thinking, how could I get out of the bus? And he says, well, aren't you going to drink it? And I opened the can and took a fake sip, and said it was really good or something along those lines. Then he smiled at me. When he smiled, I was disgustingly uneasy. His teeth were dark yellow and partially black, very, very crooked teeth, and black for days. I mean layers of this stuff all over his teeth. I worked in a dental office, mind you, and those teeth were among the most disgusting I have ever seen. Not to mention he reeked of vomit and cigarettes. I wanted to throw up and instantly wanted to leave, but it was a packed bus, in the middle of the desert and no security, so I thought, for now, I won't do anything. Then he started asking me if I go to church, and told me he had a special book for me. He handed me some children's Jesus sing-along book, and told me it was very dear to him, and he wanted me to keep it. I took it and thanked him. I was being short with him at this point, because I wanted to avoid his breath, which was nauseating. Cut to many stops later, around 10 or 11, everyone starts falling asleep. And so does he, but he falls asleep with his legs wide open, and they were rubbing up against my thigh, to which I sat with my chin to my knees, sobbing softly so he couldn't hear me. I was so uncomfortable and scared because I didn't know what kind of person he was, and I couldn't sit anywhere else because the bus was full. The lights were dim on the bus, so nobody saw me, but I wish someone did. I cried for maybe an hour before he woke up, and started trying to rest his head on my shoulder. Then he started mumbling, beautiful, and sexy. And I thought I was hearing wrong, but I still texted my boyfriend telling him about the creep, and what I thought I heard him say, and my boyfriend told me maybe I was overreacting, but I would be home soon nonetheless. While I am texting my boyfriend, I noticed Jeremy glancing over at my phone a lot. And I kind of saw what was coming, so I opened up my maps to check to see how long the ride was till I got home. And Jeremy mumbles what I knew he would. Who are you texting? Let me see. And I show him my maps and told him I was just checking to see where we were at. So then Jeremy sits up and starts mumbling again, but a little clearer. You're so pretty. You're a very pretty girl, you know that? And he touched my thigh. I was in shock, to say the least. All I could manage to say was, why are you doing this? And he said, because you are so sexy, you're just so pretty. And he said this while opening his legs more and more. At this point, I didn't even hide it. I just clearly text my boyfriend panicking, and Jeremy says, let me see your phone, little girl. And I ignore his demand, and then he let his head fall off my shoulder. I pushed it off, and he kept mumbling like he was falling back asleep. Then later the bus driver stopped and told us we were at a gas station, if anybody needed anything. Jeremy is awake now and pretending like 1 hour ago didn't happen, and hands me $100 bill and told me to get us some snacks. I told him I was fine, and he said, okay, I'll get us some honey buns and drinks, and gets out. This was my chance. I grab all my stuff and head to the bus driver and told him what happened. But he said he couldn't do anything because he didn't technically do anything wrong to me. He just freaked me out. The bus driver suggested I just sit with someone else in the meantime. I look for the friendliest face I could see. I see this really nice looking guy. Looks a lot like my favorite uncle, so I took solace in him. I didn't even realize I was crying until I tried explaining to him the situation, as brief as possible, and he understood through the panic and told me to sit near the window and he would cover for me. I look in the reflection of the bus window to see Jeremy get on and head towards the back. He notices I wasn't there and started looking around frantically. Melanie? Melanie! And the doors close and the bus driver starts back on the road. The new person I'm sitting next to begins to tell me he thought we were riding together, as did other passengers. They all thought he was either my uncle or just a creepy-looking life partner. I cried so hard when he said that because I told him I felt helpless and nobody seemed to care, and he just comforted me and told me I would be gone and away from this all soon enough. And he was right. By the time I got to my station, it was 4:20 a.m., and I breathed a sigh of relief. My boyfriend picked me up, and I told him what happened, and never saw the guy again. Creepy guy in the Greyhound? Let's not meet ever again.
About 8 years ago, I used to live in a converted garage in the back of my girlfriend's dad's house. The main house was kind of creepy, but the most creepy thing that I'd ever experienced before this night was I heard footsteps in the house when nobody was there. One night, I got home from work at about 10 p.m. My girlfriend, who also worked late, wasn't home yet, so I got to the back of the house, unlocked it, and went through the first set of doors, which opened up to the washroom. Then went to the next set of doors. As I was pulling it, it felt as if someone had pulled the door back closed. I freaked out and opened it again. I felt resistance but gave it my all and opened it. What I saw was a black figure who had its arms and legs outstretched in a sort of defensive stance. The person looked to have odd-shaped arms and legs, like a sort of odd skinny. It had the right decimals of a human being, but its legs and arms were too long for a human. It had no face or any other feature. It looked almost blacker than black, where it almost sucked into the light, so I literally could only see the outline. I stepped back because I was like, what the fuck, and tried to get a better look by stepping forward again. It ran inside my room onto my bed. The stance was really weird on my bed as well. It was almost like wide push-up position. Its hands and feet were touching the bed, but nothing else. Its arms and legs were super wide and stretched out. This was a single room with the light from a fan in the center of it, and though I was really freaked out, I had to see the person who was in my room, so I walked towards the center of the room, but as I was walking towards it, the thing was shaking my bed, in that weird position, almost as a warning. The closer I got, the harder it shook my bed. I was almost to the light when, freaking out on the bed, literally pulled the top mattress up and down, making tons of noise. At that point, I got spooked and ran out, shut the door, and stood in the backyard. So I walked over to the bushes that were kind of big near the wall of the house, and just hid there, hoping to see the person exiting my place. I didn't want to go into the main house and get help because I didn't want it to leave my sight. The back of the house didn't have any windows at all, and only exit and entrance was through those set of doors. I stood there for about an hour until my girlfriend's dad came out back to say hi to me. I called him over and told him what happened. He went in, got a gun and a flashlight, and told me we're going to go back in. We opened the first set of doors and looked around the washroom. There was nothing. Walked through the second set of doors and couldn't find anything. We turned on the light, looked literally everywhere for about a half an hour trying to make sense of how this person left, but couldn't figure it out. When we went in, we shut the doors, so it couldn't have left without us hearing it, and I had my eye on the entrance the entire time. The other thing that was weird was, when it ran, I could hear its footsteps, but it never made a sound other than that. Since experiencing this, I heard about shadow people, and everyone says that they don't make noises and can disappear. So I really don't know what that was for sure, but I think it was a shadow person. My now father-in-law tells me he believes me, but I think he and the rest of my family think I made it up or something. So I don't talk about it with them. Nothing else has happened at that place, and I've never seen anything since.
For my first job, I worked part-time at a mom and dad pizza as a delivery driver / dishwasher. The shop is within walking distance of my apartment, which I just got a loan. The shop is owned by a foreign man and his 2 nephews and another friend of theirs. I was the only female in the entire building. At first, the owner asked me to change into my work shirt the first day, in the walk-in freezer. I declined and put it on in the restaurant. He supervised me delivering pizzas and put his arm around my chair and told me to join him and the workers after work for drinks. I politely declined. I wasn't even old enough to drink yet. He asked if I had a boyfriend, which I did at the time, and I told him yes. He lived in another state. He then offered his worker to sleep on my couch because he didn't have a place to stay, without consulting me. I obviously protested and declined. He also told me that he knew my boyfriend's name, which he did, but I'd never told him. As time went on, things got weirder. The owner would take me out back, which there were no cameras around, mind you, and scold me for not pouring bleach into the dishes I was washing. I told him you can't stick your hands in the bleach, but he didn't care. He would take me out back after my shift and compliment my eyeglasses and tell me how beautiful I was. I would say, thanks, back away, and drive home every time. He came up behind me as I was washing dishes and blew on the back of my neck, and then proceeded to tell me that since I live alone, I didn't inform him of this, that I should be careful. He then stated that he knew the exact layout of the apartment because his friend lives there. I told him I had a female roommate, which I didn't, and he chuckles and told me that I did not, and that he was going to break into my apartment. I was stunned, and had 4 deliveries waiting for me to drop him off. On the way out the door, his nephew muttered something about me being his girl. I threw the pizza bags into the car and promptly pulled over, had a panic attack, and dropped all 5 pizzas. Whatever else I was delivering at the very first house, I didn't give a shit. I went home to my apartment, called my mom, and sat in the kitchen with the hammer, for safety obviously. Someone was knocking on my front door, but I didn't look to see who. I already had a feeling. Then, the pizza shop called me immediately. I left my eyeglasses in the shop and had their pizza bags. My dad went into the store, took the pizza bags back, and threatened the owner, saying that he has no problem going back to jail. My dad brought back my glasses. Months later, I ran into the nephew at my college campus and he proceeded to make unending, uncomfortable eye contact until we passed each other. After this, I got a huge 100-pound American bulldog that kept me safe until the day she died. The pizza shop is still open for business, and I'm still living in my apartment. Haven't heard a thing since. Creepy pizza guy and your creepy nephews, let's not ever meet again.
Bit of an odd situation, but 100% true. When I was younger, around 13 or 14, I attempted to take my life, the second floor of my old home. I was a very emotional teenager. Thinking back now, I can't really remember what was the last straw. But that day, I decided to take a knife from our kitchen and walk up the stairs. Our second floor was incomplete at the time. Wooden floors, but no beds, furniture, or electricity. I had used the second floor as sort of a quiet place to go and listen to music, practice my guitar, etc. Long story short, I began to cut through my wrists in typical emo kid fashion, but I ended up crying through it, sobering up, and sort of walked back down the stairs and kept living. Now the odd part, I never told anyone about it. I love my mother, and telling her at the time would have been devastating to her, especially since after that moment I seemed to be getting better. However, a few months passed, and my mother ran to my room downstairs one afternoon, pale as ever. She seemed frightened, and sort of blurted out that she saw a ghost. My mother has never believed in ghosts, so her pale look meant she was 100% certain. She said she was cleaning the room beneath the second floor, in the area next to the stairs, when she saw a young boy appear from the corner of her eye. The boy takes a few steps away from the stairs and disappears. She said she called my name, believing it was me, but freaked out and ran when it vanished in mid-air. Immediately, I thought back to my attempted suicide. I finally shared my story with her. It had been a few years now, and she was very understanding. She mentioned the spirit had my old look, longer hair, a very sort of depressed walk. It startled me. I made a few attempts to go back upstairs, but I never saw anything, and never found a reason to go back up there. Again, a few months passed. I graduated high school. I move out. I'm now living on my own. But my mom mentions this apparition from time to time. She still sees it. In similar fashion, the apparition walks down the stairs, takes a few steps towards our living room, and vanishes. I'm posting this now because my mom shared a point of view during the holidays. She came up to visit. I don't enjoy going down to our old home since it makes me feel uncomfortable, and I never seem to be able to sleep in my old room. Now, my mother finally completed the second floor this last year, and she's renting it out to a coworker who carpools with her. Apparently, a few weeks back, the coworker mentioned a kid that seems to haunt the upstairs. She said he's always doing the same thing. He's knelt down on the floor, gets up, walks across the room slowly, then walks down the stairs. I haven't met her old coworker yet, but my mom said that she showed her an old photograph of me, and the guy laughed it off, saying he was positive the spirit was me. My mom asked him if he'd like a different room to sleep in, but he doesn't seem concerned. He says the spirit has never tried to communicate or hurt him, so he just sees him from time to time, and it's become routine. I'm not sure what to make of it all. I always thought the paranormal was spirits of dead people or demonic entities of some sort, but I am very much alive, and apparently roam the second floor of my old room from time to time. It really weirds me out. My mom has mentioned I must go back someday to confront the spirit, but I truly have no idea what to say or what I'd do if I ever saw it.
This happened a few years ago while I was living in Mississauga, Ontario. I'm a female. At the time, I was 21. It was a very sunny afternoon day in early spring. I walked to Shoppers Drug Mart to buy something. Can't remember what it was. And I was leaving the plaza. I saw a white, middle-aged man walking toward the plaza. As we passed, he smiled and said hi, and being early spring, I was in a very good mood, so I smiled and said hi back. I seldom acknowledge strangers that address me, but he looked very dad-like, if that makes sense, so he seemed less threatening. I continued walking out of the plaza and turned onto Floridale Drive, a residential street. I only ever took this route if I was going to the park that's located at the other end of the street, which is where I planned to go. I lived in that area for years. It's not a main road and uncommon for people to take this route. The road is narrow because of all the cars parked on the sides of the road, and there is only one sidewalk. The majority of people I've seen are the families who live on the street. As I mentioned, it was a very sunny day. I had been walking for less than a minute when I turned around and saw that the same man was behind me. He was about 15 feet behind me. I didn't think anything of it. I continued walking, and when I glanced down, I noticed a shadow casted from behind my feet. So I turned around, and the man was now 5 feet away from me. I picked up my pace and tried to rationalize. Maybe he'd decided against the store and is going home. To reassure myself that this was the case, I crossed onto the side of the street with no sidewalk. I knew he would have no reason to follow me onto this side of the street. After I crossed, I waited a few seconds before I turned around, and there he was, behind me again. Again, I tried to rationalize. Maybe he lives on this side of the street. Again, to reassure myself, I crossed back to the other side with the sidewalk. If he did live on that side of the street, there would be no reason he would have to cross over again. But, to my surprise, he crossed over again, still behind me. I was really panicked and decided I was going home instead of to the park. I didn't want him to follow me there and be able to approach me. When I got to the end of the residential street, I took a sharp left turn and started running home. I didn't think he would continue to follow me because I had just turned onto a busier street with more cars, and it was during daylight. I turned around as I was running, and I saw this fucker running after me. I looked ahead and noticed there was a red light, no crossing ahead. I didn't want to stop at the intersection and let him catch up to me, so I took a risk and ran through traffic. When I got to the other side, I turned around and saw him standing there. He just stood there for a few seconds before he smiled and turned back around to where we just came from and walked away. I backed away slowly, continuing to look to make sure he wasn't going to turn back around and chase me. Luckily, he didn't, and I immediately ran home. I'm still not sure what he was planning to do if he caught me, but I'm happy I never found out.
This happened to me in 2008 in Las Vegas. I was living with my husband and our son, who was about 2 years old at the time. I would frequently take our son to the grocery store early in the evening with me to do some shopping and give my husband some alone time. I never really worried, considering the store was literally right outside my neighborhood. Plus, I live in a decent neighborhood. I finished my shopping and put my son in his car seat. By the time I finished loading the car, he was passed out, so I decided to quickly fill my tank at the gas station on the other side of the parking lot. While I was pumping gas, a big truck pulls up on the opposite side of my pump. The man pumps his gas, seems to take no notice of me, and leaves. As I'm finishing pumping my gas, the truck suddenly pulls up next to my car, and a man who looks like he loves his meth says, "Excuse me, but, I just felt compelled to you. How beautiful you are. As a matter of fact, the only reason why I came to get gas here is because I saw you come here from my grocery store and just had to be nearer to you. I've been trying to get the courage to approach you for a while." I was flattered, thanked him for the compliment, but quickly informed him that I was off the market. He responded with, I know it was worth a shot," and began to pull off. Suddenly he backed up and said, "If you tell your husband what I said, I'll kill him," then drove off. Needless to say, this freaked me out, so I immediately called my husband. He told me to not come directly home in case the guy follows me, so I drove around until I felt I lost him. Then I went home. My husband and I went over again and again. How could he possibly kill my husband if he doesn't know him or where he lives? Then some of the things he said started to ring in my head, like how he'd been watching me at the grocery store. I started to think how long he has seen me there, how I told him I was married and he knew. Is it possible that he has followed me home on previous occasions? We put extra locks on the doors, took extra precautions, and tried to forget about it. He was probably just some crazy guy, right? Well, about a week later, around 8 or 9 p.m., my husband decided to run to the gas station to get some cigarettes. I was on the computer in our dining room as he left through the garage door with our son sleeping in his bedroom on the other side of the house. A minute after he left, I heard the garage door into the laundry room open and somebody come in. I immediately assumed it was my husband grabbing something he forgot. I called out to him and didn't get a response, so I called his name again and received no answer, but could hear someone moving around in the laundry room, and I started to worry. All the guns in the house were in our room. I would have to walk past the laundry room to get to them. Suddenly, I heard my 2 pit bulls from my room started growling. Both of them started barking viciously and ran towards the laundry room, at which point I heard the laundry room door open to the garage and slam very quickly. At that point, I grabbed my phone and ran into my son's room and called my husband to ask him if he had just returned home for something. To my horror, he said he was at the gas station. I told him someone was in the house, but I think the dogs scared him out. He instructed me to stay in our son's room with the door locked, that he was on his way home. So I sat in the dark next to my sleeping son in terror. 2 minutes later, I heard the dogs barking and someone coming into the house, again through the garage door. After what felt like forever, my husband came into our son's bedroom. He checked the whole house, all around our property, but could not find anybody. We came to the conclusion that the stalker from the gas station must have finally taken this opportunity to catch me alone. And based on what the creepy stalker said to me, who else could it be? What really freaked me out is not knowing how long he had been watching me before that. How long he had been watching me before he approached me at the gas station before he came into our home. It really opened my eyes that someone could stalk you without you ever knowing until it's too late. I believe my pit bulls saved my life, my son's life, and possibly my husband's too that night. That had my husband not let the dogs in the house before he left, I wouldn't be here right now, nor would my son. And to this day, anytime I have to be home alone or my new husband and I are sleeping, I have to keep my pitbull inside to watch over me. I thank God every day for my pitbull and the unconditional love and protection it provides for me and my family.
This all happened a bit of a long time ago, so please bear with me as this is a completely true story that I verified with my family over the holiday. Granted, it's something that we'd all like to forget, but here it is all the same. I'm 19 now and in college, but I originally grew up in a small town in New England. The area is basically in the middle of a few game refuges and is surrounded by farms, fields, forests, and mountains as far as the eye can see. It's beautiful in the fall, but can be annoyingly creepy at night. Honestly, there is a local legend about a Blair Witch cabin on a trail near my house, and it's legitimately a Poke-Stop, but I digress. This is all irrelevant, well it may seem, but what you need to understand is that crime wasn't something that normally happened at all. There was the occasional car robbery, but they would usually just turn themselves in when they figured out that someone knew another person whose car they had robbed, and they would get in more trouble with their mother than the authorities if they didn't turn themselves in. Yeah, it's that kind of town. We all felt safe, generally. My mom was always overly cautious, though. She'd always walk my brother, sister, and myself down to the end of the street while we waited for the bus to pick us up from school. We didn't mind too much as we've always lived on a street that literally had no other kids. It was and still is all just older people. It was like having about 9 extra grandparents who would often give us sweets and other goodies. That being said, we didn't really play with any other kids on the regular. We normally just read books and entertained ourselves, so you can understand that we liked having our mother to talk to while we waited for the bus. If I got the year right, my brother was about 9 at the time, my sister 5, and myself 7. So we were young, but not incredibly so. Not to sound completely narcissistic, but we basically looked like the perfect set of children. My brother and I looked like twins, all smiles, and both of our 2 front teeth missing, and my sister was the perfect picture of rosy cheeks and cherry sundresses. She would actually be stopped occasionally on vacation to take pictures with Japanese tourists who thought she was a little toddler model. One day, on our way out to the bus, we opened the side door of our house and saw a small pile of pennies on the doormat. We were thrilled as we thought the leprechaun had come back to give us more coins. A family friend had shared one of their family traditions with us just a previous week. If you leave a potato on your doorstep on the eve of St. Patrick's Day, then a leprechaun will leave you a stack of coins in exchange for his favorite meal. The whole idea of getting money, even a measly 27 cents, was exciting for us, and we were all happy to take the coins. Our mom didn't see a problem with it and assumed that our dad had left them there before he left for work early that morning. No one really suspected anything at the time. Naturally, though, we all know that's total bullshit, especially since it's in the subreddit. For the next couple of weeks, the piles kept showing up on our doorstep and slowly began to trail down the driveway, and stopping at the end for a few days before trailing down the street to where our bus usually stops every morning. At this point, my parents began to freak out, and rightly so. After discovering that my dad hadn't left the pile of coins, they began to ask the sweet elderly neighbors whether or not they had left us the coin. Every single one said no. We stopped taking the coins after that, and the pile of coins at the end of the street grew and grew in size over the next few weeks. This had been going on for a month or so at this point. The coins were always there, and they were clearly meant for us, but no one was in sight. You're probably wondering why my parents didn't call the police at this point. Well, they didn't want us to cause them any trouble. My mother's words, not my own. One day, however, they did end up having to call. We were all standing at the end of the road beside the ominous pile of coins when a gray sedan pulled up from behind the tree line, and it parked across the road from our street. We would have thought this was normal, as many people parked there to take hikes, but the car didn't have any plates. The only way this vehicle could have been more nondescript would have been if it were painted camouflage. The clincher for us was the red scarf we saw tied to the car's side mirror. It was the same one that we had tied on our mailbox to let the bus driver know if we were all sick and wouldn't be coming to school that day. It had been stolen months ago. An investigation took place and nothing really came of it. But once the police began monitoring the house, the coins stopped coming back and the car never came back. If my mother wasn't as careful with us as she was, she would have been kidnapped faster than you can blink. After talking about it more, we came to the conclusion that he was probably after my baby sister, the one with the wide eyes and perfect apple plum cheeks. She's 16 now and can't remember any of this, but it's honestly terrifying to think about how she, my little sister, could have been gone forever. The part that scares me the most about this is that this guy wasn't your usual kidnapper. He was patient. He waited for months and months to try to get his hands on us. He watched our house, our family, for months trying to find an opportunity. He watched us walk to the end of the street every morning for the bus. He knew when we were sick. He saw us leave the potato out on our doorstep for the leprechaun, and he knew how to reel us in. The asshole knew everything and will never know how. Soon after, our dad thought it would be safer to having us trained in self-defense, and although it may sound like I'm making this up, my siblings and I now all have training in Shaolin Kenpo, 2 of us sporting second-degree black belts. Basically, my tiny sister could throw a grown man over her shoulder at the age of 11, if you could believe it. I don't really want to know where this douchebag is, but don't let any kids fall for the coin trick like we almost did. So, creepy leprechaun impersonator, if you're out there, let's not meet again for your own sake.
Going to try and keep this as short and sweet as I can. I hate long drawn out stories. Comment for more details. My wife's grandpa had passed away a couple months before we moved into the house. Grandma was moving into assisted living, and the house was up for sale. Grandma and Grandpa had raised their family in this house and had lived there for 60-some years. While the house was for sale, my wife, fiance at the time, and myself moved in. We had just graduated from uni. The house was close to our new jobs, and Grandma offered us extremely cheap rent. Although it was a creepy old house, the rent and location couldn't be beat, especially for 2 recent uni graduates. Not much updating to the house since the 80s, and the house was built in 1898. Definitely an old house. There were 3 bedrooms upstairs. The upstairs bedrooms had been vacant since the grandparents moved their bedroom downstairs in the 90s. Our cat was obsessed with the upstairs, and we heard many weird noises up there. It didn't take us long at all to realize the house was haunted. We said it was my wife's grandpa who had passed away less than a year ago. We put our bedroom on the main level, where her grandparents had theirs. When laying in the bed, the living room and kitchen were behind you. The stairwell to the upstairs was on the left-hand wall, 4 windows on the wall in front of you, and the wall to the right had 2 other windows, and the bed was close to the wall on the right. One night I was home alone, laying in bed with my cat, browsing my phone. Although I was always on edge, I was getting used to the fact that although I believed the house was haunted, it wasn't a big deal, and most likely could have a rational explanation. Until I got this strange feeling something was coming down from upstairs. Upstairs is where most of the noises came from. Unexplainable feeling, and to reassure my premonition, my cat woke up from a nap and looked to the top of the stairs. Her head followed something go down the stairs. Although I couldn't hear or see it, I knew where it was, just like my cat. Then it got to the bottom of the stairs, then passed by the first window, and it brushed the curtains as it passed. My cat and I both watched it as it moved between the walls and window curtains. As it moved by the walls where there were no curtains to brush, my cat's head followed where it was going. Although I had paranormal moments in this house before, there were nothing but noises compared to this. I knew this was it. This was a spirit coming downstairs and making itself known. It had moved from the left of the room, bottom of the stairs, to the right side of the room, and now was following the wall toward me. It brushed the window curtain 4 feet away from me, and then I completely froze. I felt an unexplainable cold and I could not move. I couldn't move for around a minute. My cat's fur was standing straight and she was looking at my head and chest. Then she did a mumbled growl. I have only heard my cat growl once or twice at other cats, and I could breathe and move again. Whatever had a hold on me had let go. I laid there for about 2 more minutes, then ran outside and took a drive. I would like to think it was my wife's grandpa messing with me. He had always liked me, and I knew him for 6 years. I would also like to think it was all in my head. But my cat acting the way she did, following the spirit move, and growling, makes me believe it was truly something paranormal. I have other smaller scale stories, ranging from my cat to my wife's best friend antagonizing it. We lived there for about 3 months.
I used to work for a catering company that did breakfast catering, a rare thing. I lived far away and had to take a very sporadic bus that either meant I'd be 20 minutes early for my already early 5:30 a.m. shift or 10 minutes late. Because I was always waiting to be let in, eventually they gave me a key and the alarm code to let myself into the place, to change and start working, rather than lingering around in the dark. The whole place was weirdly shaped, because it wasn't a normal modern building. Instead, it was the last business in a strip of garages, auto repair places, that had been built as one large group sometime back in the 30s or 40s. There were a couple of auto body shops still in the other units, and us. Honestly, it looks really convoluted when I draw it out. I would go in through the front with its cubicles, past the owner's empty office, down a hall into a kitchen area that was a maze of connected working areas around various fridges. Luckily, my place was the closest, just off the first bend. I've marked where I usually work with a square. When I started working there, one of my coworkers was adamant that there was a ghost, which I was highly skeptical about. He talked about seeing glowing white shapes in the dark, but I never saw that, and I honestly didn't believe there was anything. The unit had only ever been a car shop before, and while it backed onto an active city rail line, I had to cross a level crossing to go to work. I honestly didn't see how it could be haunted. Where would anything have come from? Yet, there were certain things early in the morning before everyone else arrived. Most I could explain, and feel I have. Metal sheet pans falling from places warping and changing as ovens heating up under them expand the metal. A chair that seemed to be facing differently when I walked past the owner's office was probably because of faulty memory. Same with things I felt were moved out of place. There were only two things that I absolutely couldn't explain, as hard as I try. We use rolling racks to keep all our sheet pans on. They're pretty standard and easy to move, and the floors in the old buildings were uneven. Sometimes I'd see a rack in place where it wasn't before, and that was fine. One time, though, I turned and looked to my right, down the long aisle of working tables to see the rack sitting right dead in the middle. Except to have rolled there from where I left, it would have had to roll up a slope. That section of the kitchen had a trough in the floor where a long drain gate rested, and where everyone else might have had erratic floor slope, I know for certain and tested later, that rack went against gravity to get where it was sitting. After that, I got a little spooked going into the building alone in the morning. I'd turn on literally all the lights when I'd come in, and often would have headphones to deal with the deafening silence. But familiarity breeds contempt, and I didn't see much to make me nervous for a few months after that. Nothing I couldn't logic away. One morning I was tired and overworked. I'd had a bad few weeks at home, and was in generally a shitty mood. And then I heard a bang. As I said, sometimes pans fell over, or stuff tipped over from around the ovens, but this was down the hall, around the corner from me instead. I leaned down and face down. In the center of the floor was a 16-gallon plastic bucket, like someone had walked over there and tired of carrying it before dropping it. The buckets were stored down there, in the second of the 3 long halls you can see in my diagram, but they all neatly nested in each other face down. The stacks hadn't toppled, and even if they had, a bucket stored in a face-down stack would hardly have landed cleanly 3 yards away. I was angry, I was tired, and I lost it. Fine. Cute. I don't have fucking time for this bullshit, so could you fuck off? I'm not interested in your nonsense today. I yelled at the empty building. Literally nothing happened after, but I honestly felt a lot better. And nothing really happened again around me. No weird rack movements, no changed chair positions. In the remaining year and a half I worked there, while other people claimed to see stuff in the building late at night, mostly the weird smoky glow I never saw, I never had any other manifestation happen around me. It was honestly almost disappointing, but kind of funny. I felt like I should put Poltergeist Shouter on my resume for future instances of this happening.
My husband and I moved into this house about 9 months ago. At first, the neighbors seemed okay. We were the high and by type. There is a woman who lives directly across the street. I'll call her Lucy. On Mother's Day, as my husband and I were leaving for brunch, Lucy wished me a happy Mother's Day, and I wished her the same. Lucy began approaching our driveway as we started to pull off. I didn't want to be rude, so I rolled down the window and told her we were in a hurry and we could talk when I returned. She became hysterical, yelling obscenities and throwing her hands in the air. My husband pulled off. When we returned, we noticed 3 of our 4 planters on pedestal stands located outside the front door were turned over. As we got out of the car, she ran out of the house and stood at the end of her driveway. She didn't say anything. She just watched us. We decided to go to the store, replace the planters, and clean everything up. When we put up the new planters, we also decided to get 6 Wi-Fi security cameras to put in all of our windows in case she pulled something like that again. When we pulled up, Lucy ran out again, but this time she brought a chair to the end of her driveway to watch us. As we were cleaning up and replacing the planters, a neighbor came to speak to us. He told us that the landlord should have warned us about Lucy, that Lucy sometimes does things like that if she feels slightly disrespected. Our response was we're not there for her entertainment or companionship, and she needs to stay away from our property. When we began installing the cameras, she went back into the house. The next day we left for work. Lucy ran outside in a nightgown and stood at the end of the driveway with her arms folded. When we returned home, we saw the planters were moved but not knocked over. This time we weighed them down with rocks. We looked at the video and saw two girls come from Lucy's house. They tried to push over the planters. When they didn't succeed, they went back to Lucy's house. We called the police to get the incidents on record in case Lucy decided to escalate the situation. For the next 2 months, every time there was movement in the front of our house, Lucy would run outside. We decided to ignore her since it was clear she was mentally unstable. One day when we came home from work, she blocked our driveway with her car. We called the police who made her move it, but did nothing else. We explained the situation to the officer, who stated we should just keep records of her behavior and call if she makes contact with us. A week later, she blocked our driveway with her car again. We called the police again. This time they gave her a ticket. Lucy continued to run outside any time there was movement, but now she also would pull up in her vehicle about a minute before us, wait in her car and get out when we got out. This happened no matter what time we got home after work. One night, we noticed she was pulling out of a driveway at the end of the block. After this, we decided to use another entrance into the subdivision. This worked for about a week. Then she sat outside of the entrance and followed us in. I began videotaping these incidents with my camera. A month ago is when things really escalated. I came home from lunch and there was a huge trailer blocking my driveway. I asked the driver to move and he refused, stating his friend was visiting Lucy. I told him to move or I would call the police. He moved, but then he moved back once I parked my car. I called the police and the number on the side of the trailer. The owner stated the trailer should not have been in a residential area and apologized. The police ticketed the trailer and made the driver leave. The man visiting Lucy was arrested for outstanding warrants for unauthorized entry and criminal trespassing. About a week after this incident, she followed us into the subdivision, parked her car and ran to the end of our driveway. She yelled about us contacting the owner of the trucking company and how stupid we are for doing it. She turned around and went to her driveway when she saw I had my cell phone recording her. We called the police, who took another report and warned her to stay away from us and the house. We called the police, who took another report and warned her to stay away from us and the house. She went on about how we didn't own the house and how she could go anywhere she wants to on our property. The officer warned her that if she does come on our property, she could be arrested. About a week ago, a group of kids came on our property. They began fighting on the front lawn and throwing trash everywhere. Lucy sat on the porch and yelled for the kids to yell louder and fight more. We called the police. The officer told us they were just kids playing and they all denied being sent by Lucy. We showed the officer the video and he still refused to do anything. He told Lucy to stay away from us, a warning other officers have made, and she ignores them. A warning other officers have made, and she ignores. The day after this, Lucy came outside and stood in the middle of the street watching us. She has continued to do this every day, including this morning. It is obvious the police are not going to do anything. We have 3 more months left on our lease. Needless to say, we're going to move. But until then, we will keep calling the police and saving the video recordings of her stalking and harassing us. This happened a while back when I went through a bit of a stoner phase. Me and a friend of mine would meet up at night on occasion to smoke weed after getting off of work. We would chat, smoke, listen to music in his car, and then go back to our houses as the high wore off. This one particular night he picked me up at around 10:30 p.m. and parked his car at a popular local park. Rather than smoking, we took marijuana-infused candies. We sat in the car with the music playing loudly as we were slowly getting higher and higher as the edibles kicked in. Our attention to the car's surroundings had by this point fully dissipated, and we were shocked as we saw two dark figures jump up from the right side of the vehicle and start running forward through the parking lot. As they started running, a large SUV with the trunk already open quickly drove in front of them. The two figures hopped in and shut the door to the trunk of the car as it sped away from the park. Despite how idiotic it sounds now, we both had a bit of a laugh after they drove away, figuring it was just some teenager screwing around. About 30 minutes passed and we had forgotten about it. Due to our then currently altered state of mind, we had yet again stopped paying attention to our surroundings. A few cars had driven in and out of the parking lot since then, and we had never bothered to look at them too closely. As our high was at its peak in intensity, I suddenly noticed in the side mirror that the SUV that had sped away earlier was parked directly behind us with its lights off. Pointing this out to my friend, he looked pretty nervous, but began trying to rationalize it, saying that it just may be a different car after all, or maybe they just wanted to park for a bit like we were at the time. We both got a bit creeped out and decided to start driving off, and then the SUV behind us started its engine and began to follow us. It was about midnight by this point, and there were no other cars on the road, so they just kept on following us. We kept turning on to different roads throughout the quiet residential neighborhood we found ourselves in. We were trying desperately to see if we could lose them, but they were a mere car length behind us the whole time. We were driving aimlessly for about 10 minutes, panicking at this point. We decided our best option would be to drive somewhere where we might encounter other people. We made our way to a local grocery store at the nearest strip mall, parking next to the only other car in the lot. Parking sounds like the last thing we want to do, but I wasn't driving, and my friend was terrified of the idea of being chased while stoned on a busier road in the middle of the night. As we parked, the cars started to rapidly circle us over and over again. They did this for about 15 minutes. Eventually, one of them opened the sunroof and poked his torso out and began yelling at us. The man was white, average-sized, and appeared to be in his late 20s or early 30s. He kept repeating something along the lines of, "We're going to kick your fucking ass, you fucking faggots," as he made obscene gestures directed at us. This was accompanied by everybody else in the car yelling and trying to intimidate us. I could make out the voices of 3 or 4 other people. I was positive that at this point they were waiting for one of us to snap and exit our vehicle. Me and my friend were furiously debating as to if we should call the cops or not. My friend was hesitant due to his somewhat intoxicated state and was worried he can get into trouble with the police. We waited another 5 minutes as they did this, until we saw a rather beefy and muscular man exit the grocery store with shopping bags in his hands, heading towards the parked car alongside us. He began to unlock his car. I bolted out of my friend's car and quickly explained the situation to the man. He quickly noticed the SUV circling us. As the man sticking out of the SUV saw that we were no longer alone, he ducked back into the car as it drove off down the road. The man seemed sympathetic to the situation we found ourselves in and waited with us for a few minutes until we were sure the SUV wasn't coming back. Me and my friend drove around for a little bit to make sure we were definitely not being followed again, and he soon dropped me off at home. I cut my weed use drastically since that night, and my friend quit entirely. It was probably the most scared the both of us had ever been in our lives. Car full of possibly homophobic stalker maniacs? I hope I never meet any of you again. Hey guys. So, before I say my thank yous, I just want to give a big sorry to everybody and to the narrators that participated in this video for the delay of it. I'm really sorry about that. In all honesty, Friday the 13th hit me hard. I mean, not only did my file get deleted, but I literally just bought a new gaming PC, and I mean, like, I really wanted to get into gaming on the PC for a while now, because I see what Steam can do, I see what PC can do, and I wanted to get into it. So I spent a lot of money on this new PC for video editing, gaming, pretty much everything. And what do you know it, the first day I get it, I play on it, the second day, the thing just crashes. I cannot tell you how angry I was and then to find out the next day that somehow the spirit of Jason Voorhees went into my laptop, took my file, and deleted it. Now, I'm not saying Jason Voorhees did that, but seeing as how it was Friday the 13th, yeah. But anyways, like I said, thank you all for being so patient, and thank you to all the narrators that participated in this video. You guys are awesome. Thank you all so much. It's just, oh my god, this week or this weekend has just been, irritating. I mean, and by the way, when I did play on my PC, I was trying to play Battlefront 2, or Star Wars Battlefront 2, because the new one sucks. And I was trying to play on it, and it just kept crashing. Now, I figured out how to do that problem, but, oh my god, just, oh my god, like I said, it's just one of these weeks or weekends where it's just, you just want to forget about it as soon as it's over. But anyways, guys, thank you all for watching. Thank you again to all the narrators that participated in this video. All of you are awesome. I can't wait to work with you all again in the future. And just remember, guys, the best ideas always come out of nightmares.